Hey guys, my name's Mike Vaughn, and welcome to Hot Topic, where we are talking about something really interesting that I was thinking about lately, which is with like Madam Web, uh, like that whole disaster. Is that kind of ruining the MCU's plan going forward? But I'm not alone. I have two really awesome guests. Rob and Ricky are here to help me kind of discuss this really interesting topic. So, yeah, just give them a hand, audience, pretend audience. um,
Yay!
yeah.
Thank
So
you.
I'm just gonna like get right into it. Uh Rob, we'll go with you first. What do you think about, the Sony verse, and do you feel like it's kind of tarnishing what the MCU's trying to do as far as writing the ship?
So I try to give the benefit of the doubt when I can, but I do feel frustrated because to me, the Sonyverse, I feel like it really started to feel like a Sonyverse when you got into the Amazing Spider-Man series, and they had all these Easter egg drops of like, oh look, there's this wall of different thing. Oh, is that Doctor Octopus's tentacles? Is that Vulture's wing? So they were setting up, and they had this big plan for a not for a Sinister Six film that would have been really cool to see. And in my mind, because Sony was trying to use the Spider-Man like playhouse, but not deal with Spider-Man. And so like, oh, that would be a great idea. Sony can do all this stuff that's not specifically Spider-Man and it'll fill in the gaps or it'll add stuff where it can be related or not. It left in this nice nebulous space. But now I feel like they're trying to kind of just go so far away that it's almost unrecognizable that it is Spider-Man. Some of the creative choices they're making, I'm like, why are you doing this? And there's people who say, well, because they want to retain the rights, because they want to avoid
Mhm.
this or that. But to me, it's like if you're gonna make a movie, make a good movie.
Yeah. Ricky, what do you think? What's your thoughts on that?
You know, uh, I watched last night, I watched Venom 2 just in preparation for this because that's pretty much the only one I haven't seen aside from Madam Web. Um, and I'll say, like, I feel like the Sony verse really is kind of leaking into the MCU and kind of and like what you were saying is like, is it really kind of like destroying it? And I feel like I don't know who's following who anymore. MCU used to be a world building experience. Like it was like all about, what movie was coming out, then the next movie that was coming out, and they were all interconnected and they come together to the Avengers and they do they were able to take Iron Man, who honestly, in my opinion, was not really like the most popular character at the time.
Yeah.
And they were able to develop that into a story, into an arc, into a huge world culminating with the Avengers. But when you look at the way that Sony is taking it, they're taking such obscure characters that are quintessential to Spider-Man that they basically turn it into what I would say, you know, just a mishmash of storylines. And it's kind of like it feels like that's where the current direction of the MCU is going because, we're looking at movies that are coming out that don't really have a connection or don't feel connected or just are, just a bunch of light shows or CGI. Like the Marvels, I enjoyed the story. But I felt that the CGI really was the biggest villain of the entire movie. And then, I feel like that the same thing is kind of with what Sony's doing is that they're turning it into the beginning of every movie for them is basically um a prelude. There's no action at the beginning. And I've heard this about Madam Web. I haven't seen it, but it's very, very much of a slow burn at the beginning. I felt the same way with Venom 2. There was a lot of scenes that didn't really need to be there.
Yeah.
A good correlation would be like Venom going into the club for whatever reason, no reason, whatever, versus like, like when you look at what was it, Captain America, the Captain or the Falcon and I'm sorry, what is it? The Falcon
Winter
and the Winter
Soldier.
Winter
Soldier.
Soldier.
Yeah, like when you have the dance scene, like, okay, that was fun, but was it really necessary? Not really. But it was only a couple seconds. Whereas with Venom, it was like, I don't know, 10 minutes of him walking around in a club for no reason. So I don't know at this point who's following who,
Yeah.
but it's really not, it's not working for me as much as it used to be. I feel like
Yeah.
they don't get into the action.
Yeah. And if we're talking about Venom 2, I just I watched it once and I don't really remember much, but I remember like there being a lot of bickering between the symbiote and Tom Hardy's character where it felt like a weird bad sitcom. Like,
Yeah, it
I
was
don't know.
honeymooners. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think
Um
like in that regard, they were trying, from what I saw for Venom 2, they were trying to really amplify the almost homoerotic bond between the
mm,
symbiote and Eddie. And I feel like what Sony does is they take, I don't know if it's this whole algorithm thing, but they take these concepts that seem to really resonate with people and they hyper focus on it. And instead of saying like, oh, this could be done in a fun or even interesting way, it's just like, oh, people like it when they talk in a way that sounds like a couple. Let's just have as many scenes of that. It's like, but you still have to make a Venom film, and that's what's confusing to me.
yeah.
Yeah, and
Sorry. Go ahead.
well, I was just gonna say, I did actually appreciate the queer representation of Venom 2, in the sense that they were like that. But I'll be honest, like if I was in a relationship with that kind of bickering, I wouldn't want to be in that relationship.
Yeah.
So
Um yeah, no, I don't know. It's interesting because Rob and I before you came on was talking a little bit about like how MCU is, give them credit, they're trying to right the ship. They're finally they're only releasing one MCU movie this year. That's Deadpool 3, which I'm really excited about. But you also kind of have like these garbage movies that, still have an association with Marvel. And I have to like wonder if like Kevin Feige and them are like super happy about that right now. And like the discourse over, so I know outside of Madam Web, we have like Craven the Hunter and there was a third one?
um, yeah, I honestly I don't recall.
Yeah.
Yeah, I thought it was just
It's so
Craven,
hard to
but yeah.
follow. Yeah, I think it's just
Um,
that.
Yeah. And I think that's indicative of like, it's kind of like these who cares kind of movies. But like, you know, months before Madam Web, even the disc, I mean, no, I guess like when it like really hammered home when we saw the first trailer for it and everyone was like, "Oh my god, this looks embarrassingly bad." Like not bad, but just like how is this a real movie? Kind of bad. And no one seems surprised because I think like no one has that great of expectations from the, Sony Spider Verse. But um like I said, I was also saying this earlier that I still forget that Sony did make Into the Spider Verse those films, and they are perfection. So I don't
Yeah.
know, y'all. What do y'all think? It's a mess.
I honestly like if you've watched the SNL with Dakota Johnson, like I don't even think she thought it was going to be a good movie.
Yeah.
So, you know, like I just I will say this. I am very, very, very excited for Deadpool 3.
Yeah.
I think that's gonna be the saving grace. And like the whole line of like I am Marvel Jesus or whatever in the Super Bowl ad, like it's completely true. Ryan
Yeah.
Reynolds like has completely redeemed himself as a superhero, like with Deadpool alone in all shapes and forms. And honestly, I really think that that's gonna make things work. And I hope that
Mhm.
at some point that they really kind of realize that Sony and Marvel Studios comes together and realizes they really have to start interconnecting in a
Yeah.
way that makes sense. And you know, I think one of the bigger problems, and you mentioned Kevin Feige, I feel like I'm not sure if like you know the superhero burnout thing that's going on right now is like all about the you know there's so many things that you have to watch TV shows, you have to watch this, you have to watch that, you have to do this, you have to recon, you know, it's all these things, it's all this media. I don't know if Kevin necessarily was the one that made those decisions or whether or not it was an upper suit at Disney or whatnot, but I think that was kind of like where we're splitting off. You know, there's so many different projects that you have to work on and you have to compete with, and you have to like have Disney Plus, you have to have this service, you have to have Hulu, you have to all these different things. And it's like, I don't really want to keep up with it as much anymore.
Yeah.
But when you have the disconjointed part of Sony, that's when it's like, well, that's not as fun either. So it's kind
Yeah.
of like it's two ends of the spectrum.
Yeah, and that's a really great point. And I think like they really this seems so common sense to me, but I'm like, y'all need to just get together and be on the same page as far as like what you want to do with these movies. I mean, I think Madam Web so far, well, the last time I checked, so just putting it out there, last time I checked, it was like it made $8 million,
Mm,
which is like really bad. Like, I
mm.
don't know if that was just opening weekend. I'm sure it's probably a little bit more now, but that's embarrassingly bad. Like it was $80 million to make, but also they say you're supposed to, I don't know, add maybe another 20 or 30% on top of that for marketing that they don't really factor in. So, it's going to be a while before they even kind of break even with that movie. And it's interesting, Ricky, that you brought up like Dakota Johnson. Apparently, her press junkets for this movie have been like interesting to say the least. Like she's kind of like, I don't give a shit. I'm over this. Um, which as somebody that has I mean, I've never like I guess like Luke Wilson's probably the closest like big actor that I've interviewed thus far, but like it's so not professional not to just promote your movie, even though it's kind of shit.
Well, the rumor
Um,
mill is that like she fired her agent after the first trailer came out, and it was like,
oh,
yeah, I'm not sure if I think some people are saying it's because she was told that it would be part of the MCU, and that it
oh,
wasn't,
mm,
but it could also be she's like, wow, like I didn't know it was gonna
yeah.
be this bad. Um,
Ooh,
but I mean,
shit.
it's all rumor until it's confirmed, I guess.
But how? Yeah, and I didn't know about the agent part. I did hear about um allegedly the cast members thought they were in the mainline MCU and not Sony's, or they were like, again, allegedly, I have to say, duped into thinking that. I don't know if that's true. That's what I've heard, but how would you not? I don't know. Like, wouldn't your contract say like, okay, you're like this is uh, co Sony
It's with
Marvel?
Sony Studios, right?
Yeah,
Like,
Yeah.
I mean, it's not Marvel
I don't know.
Studios.
Well, maybe this was like before they actually signed the contracts. Maybe before they kind of like officially locked in. I I don't know. Maybe at that point it was too late to back out. I don't know, but
I'm like always just skeptical in general, and so I imagine because the title on the like the production titles when they come in, it does say in association with Marvel, and like it has the red Marvel thing. So
Mm,
you
yeah,
could make the argument it's connected to Marvel, it's just not the Marvel Cinematic. So maybe
yeah,
they told them, yeah, it's a Marvel film, but it's not. It's a Sony film with Marvel
yeah.
characters.
And
yeah.
it's so funny, like the excitement that people are like, um, oh, it's gonna be MCU Spider-Man film, and then it's like Sony, and it's like, well, it just goes down.
And I will
Exactly.
say it's been it's been an interesting ride, this like back and forth comparison, because when the
Mm.
Marvel Cinematic Universe really started taking shape, I don't know if you would call it Avengers or Iron Man, like how far where you would say it's a full universe. I was engaged because I wanted to see how these pieces connect, because they did lay it out as these things will all be together as part of something. And by the time I want to say WandaVision came out, I was really hooked on like, oh wow, I can't wait to see how these are going to lead to. But after that, it started to kind of reveal itself. It's kind of like a shackle. Like you can't make big steps without affecting it. You can't do
Mm.
big movies without doing this or that. And so when Sony was doing stuff like, oh, well, they're not beholden to that, so they can do whatever they want, but it's also a catch 22 because now you have, Tom Hardy is doing all this stuff like, oh, I wonder when he's going to talk to Tom Holland, or I wonder when and it's
Yeah.
like he's not, or he may never, or it's like we can only do but so many things, and have a little teaser at the end of what was it, Far From Home, where it's like
Mm.
they didn't even talk. He's just there, like he's just, and then boom, in and out.
Well,
And
yeah. Venom licked the TV screen with Tom Hardy on it. So at the
mm,
end of Venom 2. So
yeah.
we got that at least. That was the most interaction I think we're gonna
I
probably
mean,
get
listen, I
with them.
feel like Tom Hardy could lick me and I'd be okay with that.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, for sure.
Just
Absolutely.
I'm just putting it out there. I'm sure he watches this show. Yes, Daddy hurt me.
Get him on.
Oh my God, I love that. But no, but it's I mean it's kind of maybe not super off topic, but I know like Rob, to your point about, leading to something. And I know this was something that really the DCU should have been doing from jump. They should have had their own kind of Thanos they were building to. But to kind of bring it back to this, do you all think that like Sony should be maybe course correcting and building to maybe pick a really big villain to sort of build to? What are your thoughts?
I actually don't think so, because I feel like if the cinematic universe for Marvel has taught us anything, it's that to get locked into this thing means you're forced to make certain choices. You can't tell certain stories because they won't
Mm.
be in service to whatever. Like once the Infinity Stones got introduced, I don't know if you noticed, but all of the films from that point forward at least had to have them either as a MacGuffin, make reference to them, or something attached to them. Where it's like there's so much rich history in Marvel that's not attached to Infinity Stones, and now it's just lost, or it has to be done after the fact. Like now we have to wait for all these other things that have nothing to do with Thanos or Infinity Stones. And maybe that was the point. It's like, oh, we'll focus on this one thing, keep it focused, keep the narrative going on this, and then we'll free it up. But in my opinion, we're on like what, phase four of it's either four or five. But like we're at this part now where everything's so disjointed and disconnected. It's like some people want the connection, some people want to break free, and no one's really clear on how they want everything to combine, because in this original path, everything was leading up to Thanos. Like, oh, he's coming, he's coming, he's coming. He gets
Mhm.
there, we have this big epic moment. It's like, all right, well, where do we go to next? And with Sony, I liked the fact that it was kind of self-contained, and maybe you tease this or that, but by making it self-contained, you really have to focus on how strong the narrative is for each film. Whereas films like the Marvels, I liked it, but you could tell, oh, this is just a setup for this, or this is just to get X-Men in, or what have you. And so, in my mind, films are being made just to bridge the gap to get to the next thing, and it's doing a disservice to what the films could be.
Hmm. That's a good
I
point.
agree with that 100%. Like Marvel's is very much setting up the introduction of the X-Men. I mean, as Miss Marvel, the show did as well. You even had the 90s 97 theme playing, when they told her she was a mutant or had a mutant gene. And I feel like that really does make it almost feel like you just have to go see it in order to get to the payoff. It's
Yeah.
like, you have to take the journey to get to the destination.
Yeah.
But when I go to the movies, if I choose to pay, whatever it is, of $30 plus to go to the movies to get some popcorn, whatever, I want to make sure I'm getting the destination, not just the travel.
Yeah.
And I feel like that's a great point that you make, Rob, that it really is about You know, they're setting up things rather than actually creating interesting stories to tell.
Yeah. Um, and it's yeah, it's kind of interesting because it's like um I was talking to Dom Fisher about this, who works with me at Geek Vibes, and he was like saying that, you know, the barrier to entry for some of these things are like intimidating, right? Like y'all were saying, like, yeah, you have to, you know, follow with all the shows, you have to see X, Y, or Z movie. Like your average Joe public just isn't like that, just feels too much like homework for most people. Like for like super fans and stuff, yeah, that's great. Like, but it's still, you know, I think that's kind of what was beautiful about like early Marvel, like with Iron Man. Like you knew who this character was. It was an origin story. It was easy to get into. You understood what this guy was about, and you were on board. I mean, Spider-Man, we all know his origins. It's very easy to kind of get into. Like, I don't know. I just think y'all just need to like scrap your writers, start over. I don't know if it's just like scorched earth, maybe just reset shit. It sucks. I mean, I think Craven the Hunter could be a really interesting movie, but like I am so not excited for it. And I've kind of always wanted to see that character um on the big screen. Um, but now I'm kind of like, oh, okay. Like it'll probably be one of those I'll wait to see how it is. Now, Rob, you saw Madam Web. So what do you think? What are some of your scorching, this is not hot takes, but what is your scorching hot take on that film?
I lament what could have been, I guess would be my hot take. And I will say, to avoid any, I guess, major spoilers, the thing that frustrated me the most, you have this conceit of this character who stumbles upon clairvoyancy, this idea of like something's going to happen, can I change it or not? And you get these different instances where she's seeing things and it's like, oh, how will this play out, or can I prevent it, what have you? And I would have loved to have seen kind of a Rube Goldberg effect. I don't know if you're familiar with like the Final Destination films where
Mhm.
someone's like, oh, you're gonna die, but like you'll die of X, but you don't know how you get there. And I would have loved to see more concepts of she sees things but doesn't know how A gets to C or what have you. So she's got to figure out B. And then by the end, she's making B happen. Like that would have been a great film to see that growth and that potential. But instead, you just get I don't even know. Like I'm still at a loss as to the significance or relevance of this. The like Ricky was saying, it feels like a setup for another movie that we haven't seen yet, but it's a terrible setup. I like there's not a lot of value in the set. Like this is something that could have been done in like a TV special or something. Like
Yeah.
I have no idea why this film was made, and it just sucks because there is a cool potential, right? You have your animated Spider-Verse, and you have someone who's been kind of a central figure to this um, web of connection and things like that. Like, what a great concept! You're building your universe with this woman, and instead, it's not that. It's just, hi, I'm Dakota Johnson. I'm here for the paycheck. Like, I don't know. It's just, and the villain I know Ezekiel Sims from the comic book, and it's not the same character at all. Like in name only, some things about him, sure, but like this is a completely different character for this film, and I'm like, why have him then? Like pick some, like, are you going off name recognition? Like pick someone else, do something other than don't bastardize these characters because you're relying on name recognition.
Yeah. Yeah, because like Madam Web's was like a whole different character. Like, wasn't she like an so we were also, before we started recording, we were talking about like hot Aunt May. Um and you know, I guess because I think I mean like I'm pretty sure like Madam Web in the comics was like an elderly woman, that was like disabled, right? And
Mhm.
Yeah, she was in a
so
wheelchair.
yeah, so it's kind of like, is that ableist though that they changed that like that?
Mm.
Maybe ageist at least.
I mean, it's problematic in a couple ways. I do remember as a kid watching the animated series, and I didn't have knowledge of Madam Web until that series, and she was actually voiced by Stan Lee's wife, who I
Mm.
thought was really cool because it's like, oh, I like she's weaving her own web in the, but just the storyline they went with in the animated series, I don't believe actually occurred in the comics, but it was such a cool concept of this woman trying to motivate Peter, like you're important in all realities, you're important in all real this and that, and like this connected web again. I'm like, wow, that's a great concept. Even before the whole everything's a multiverse thing, they were already doing something like that. And just to see the way this character is showcased, yes, it's her origin, but it's like it could have been so much better, like such a better story.
Yeah.
And
Yeah. I mean, I kind of wonder
Ah,
at a certain I wonder at a certain point if like Marvel and Disney's just going to be like, I will give you a gabillion dollars just to like give us these characters back. Like I I I feel like they probably want to retain these rights and shore everything up like so badly. Probably like, I don't know, whatever like secret hit team that they have that can get that done. Um, just a joke. Always have to clarify. But you know what I mean? Like it's just they're like, because like I said, the whole through line is they're on so many different pages. But I think the one thing that maybe will kind of be cool with fans is like you all were saying, like they're so different that like I think that people can kind of separate that and not be like, I don't know. This is just it's such a shitty time for all these like really bad Sony verse movies, of course, because I know, like I said, MCU is trying, feels like in earnest to sort of like, get their shit together again. I really feel like, the MCU is gonna hit that same high. Maybe not like Endgame's high, but like I think we're gonna get back there eventually. But this is not helping.
I
Like,
I do like what Ricky had said earlier about like Iron Man, right? This character who maybe some people knew but didn't have a lot of big fanfare, and then John Favreau took him and made him relatable by making him, this whole weapons dealer type. Oh, and setting it instead of I think it was like Vietnam or whatever the comic history, like setting it in a more modern time and reframing it as like, oh, this is a business tycoon. This is someone who's relevant, for almost like a Bruce Wayne type setup, and then the humility, like learning to be humble. And I feel like the disconnected Sony films each want their own Iron Man. Like every time they're making a film, they're like, this could be a franchise starter. This could be a thing. This could be this a thing. And with Madam Web, it's like the effort just wasn't there. And so I just wonder, is it just to retain the rights? Because if you are trying to make a new franchise, a new cinematic universe, then every film, if you're going to do it this way, and if you're going to build up these characters in your own unique way, I don't mind when you make changes to the characters if it does service or if it makes it relevant or interesting. There's nothing in Madam Web that made her relevant or interesting. Whereas you look at Iron Man, they make him relevant and interesting. And even with Venom, it's like it's mixed reviews, I think, because there's some things I really like, some things I'm not a fan of, but they made it relevant and interesting. Like you're not beholden to the comics, but if you are going to make changes, make them worthwhile changes.
yeah.
I,
Is it?
I, I, I
Oh,
agree
sorry.
with that too. I just wanted to say, I agree with that. But, going back to your point, Mike, putting the rights back into, I feel like if Disney did have the rights to the Spider-Man characters, that would make it a better storytelling experience in a way. But also, I kind of feel like the corporate influence of Disney has been kind of the,
Yeah,
the drag, like they want to be everything everywhere all at once, if you
yeah,
will. And it's like they want to have they're kind of like the Apple of entertainment. Once you get into the ecosphere, you're there, and
yeah,
that's what they want. And it's like you have to like watch the Disney Plus shows, you have to watch this show, all these things. And I feel like maybe what has been really dragging Marvel Studios down has really been that corporate influence. So like while I do think it would be a benefit to bring the IPs in to Disney, I think having a little bit of separation might be better, but
Hmm.
whether or not Sony's the right people to do it,
Yeah.
that I don't think is
Uh,
really.
And
yeah.
I will say another point that I do want to bring up. So this is a hot take, I imagine. I was not a Tom Holland fan in the original Marvel Cinematic Universe films, and I'll tell you why. It wasn't necessarily his take on the character, it was the fact that they made his Spider-Man so beholden to Tony Stark. And if you look at if the Homecoming film, it was Peter trying to prove to Tony why he was important and relying on Tony Tech for the suit, relying on Tony's admiration for this, doing everything for Tony Stark, Tony Stark, Tony Stark, Tony Stark. You get to the very end and he's stripped down to just this homemade costume, which should have been how it started. And you get him like, all right, I got my epic moment. I proved myself. Like, congratulations, kid, you can be an Avenger. And he does the whole wonderful, no, I want to be my own thing. Like, oh, perfect. Then Tony Stark dies. Far From Home happens, and he's in the shadow of Tony Stark. How do I live without this mentor? Oh, I've got to be my own thing. Oh, and Tony gave me the glasses, and I've got to manage. And look, the bad guy is an enemy made from Tony Stark. Like it was so beholden to Iron Man, and it was so frustrating because like I want a Spider-Man film, and I get this is great that this is linking it perfectly to the MCU, but I'm getting Iron Man and Spider-Man in all of my Spider-Man films, and then you get to
Yeah.
um what is it, No Way Home, and it
Mhm.
finally feels like it's a Spider-Man film, but you still tie in that Doctor Strange. And to be fair, Doctor Strange wasn't as significant a part as Tony Stark was, but it was still like you see this kind of shadow hovering in all the things, and you never get like a pure Spider-Man film. You get Spider-Man and Friends every time. It's like Spider-Man has more than enough rogues, more than enough context, more enough to have his own film. So
Yeah.
that is kind of the danger of MCU. It's like you'll forever be linked, and in some properties, for whatever reason, like, oh, we don't trust it to be its own thing.
Hmm.
And that's the irony too, is that they don't include Spider-Man in the Sony films, but they
Right.
link him so closely to the Marvel Studios films. Whereas like Madam Web would definitely benefit from having Spider-Man. I mean, I know from spoilers and whatnot that the parents are there, or Ben and Mary are there. So like why don't they include Spider-Man and make him beholden to their universe rather than just straight to the MCU?
Yeah, that's a really great point, and that was something that I baffles me, right? Because okay, maybe it would be weird in like Craven the Hunter or something, but like why is he not in the Venom movies? Like, okay, maybe in the first one you just want to do a solo thing. Great. Why not tie him into the second one? Not, I mean, Madam Web, obviously, no brainer. Like, is there, I mean, but Sony owns the rights to that character, so they can use him for whatever. They don't need like Disney's sort of seal of approval, right? Like, that was the
Right.
whole. So, there's got to be a reason, though. That is so weird. That is so bizarre. You're 100% right. Like, I don't know. I mean, because I think like people still really love that character. Like that is, I mean, foundationally, he's always been this relatable, character. He was supposed to be sort of like that every
Every
geeky kid
man.
in school. Yeah. That's why I feel like that's kind of the secret sauce to those films. I mean, I love the Raimi films because there's something so pure
Hmm.
and very comic book like where it's not as like quippy and one linery, but it still is kind of campy and it knows it's campy. I mean, it's Sam Raimi. Sam Raimi like grew up on like Three Stooges and stuff. Like he knew what he was doing, but like I don't know. I feel like sometimes there's not fun anymore in some of these movies. Like it just feels a little like they're trying so hard not to be. a comic book movie. What do y'all think about that?
Well, I think that's why Into the Spider-Verse works so well because they fully embrace
Hmm.
the comic. It's
Mhm.
not just the art style, but it's also the we'll have these references and we're not beholden to making them, make sense all the time. Sometimes it's just fun. I think there's a scene in the latest Into the Spider, what is it? I forget what the second one's called, but
It's
like the
Across
second
the Spider
Across the
Verse.
Spiders, yeah, where there is an Ezekiel Sims character in the film, but you don't recognize him as Ezekiel Sims. You have to like look it up in the thing, and I think he plays like a psychiatrist or something, and it's just that's odd. And then when he's getting chased by all the different, it's like there's that one, that one, that one, that one, that one, but they're not trying to make it super beholden to anything, and it's not getting so caught up in the chaos, which would be so easy to do when you have all these variations. There's still a very clear narrative throughput, and like
Mhm.
these people have their lane, they have their place, and you have the story play out, but you don't try to make it everything is super grim and things like. And we're dealing with significant things like, do we let Ben die or not? Do we let Miles' dad die or not? Like it's like what makes a Spider-Man, like what makes a hero, what makes things happen, what is real and or not real, but what is with the MCU, it's the sacred timeline. Like, oh, can we alter the sacred time? It's like, yeah, anything goes, man. Like what happens happens. And so to me, I think the reason why the Into the Spider-Verse stuff works so well is because it opens up possibilities. It doesn't necessarily say no, but when it's saying yes, it's not like everything, everything, everything. It's like it has a purpose.
Mhm.
It has a reason.
Yeah. I fully agree with Rob. Like I believe that when you're making a comic book movie, it should be a comic book movie. It should be something that it's fun, that's exciting. DC does a lot of darker themed, but they still keep in line with the comics.
Mhm.
But when, like, for instance, like the Marvels is a good example. The very beginning of that movie, Miss Marvel is doing her drawing, and they're doing that stylization where they have the ships and the things flying around all over her, and the comic stuff. But literally, that is the only scene that happens then. And it's like, but that's kind of quintessential to her character. That makes her fun. That makes her, to be fair, she carried the movie regardless. But also at the same time, it made it like that stylization is something that really is missing when it
Mhm.
comes to comic book movies. It's like they were like, here's a little snippet of it, but now we're going to get serious.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's kind of where it loses the fun. It's like comic book movies shouldn't be serious. There should be consequences. There should be something that's going to be happening, like something that's coming down the line, but it should still retain the fun. It shouldn't always be completely serious. It shouldn't be something that, makes you feel kind of icky after watching it. And I feel like with the Marvels specifically, I felt, that was a good story, but it was again bridging that gap between one film to lead to the next film.
Yeah. Yeah, no, yeah, like I said, it's just I don't get it. I just feel like why is it so wrong to have a little bit of sense of fun with, again, like you said, you can balance that with some seriousness.
Mhm.
So this is definitely a scorching hot take, but I think the last really true fun comic book feeling kind of movie was Wonder Woman 84.
Yes.
And listen, it was a hot mess, okay? But I had fun with it. It just felt like a really weird what was it, like the Silver Age comics where they were getting kind of goofy. It just reminded me of like a really weird, Silver Age comic book film put to life. And I can see a time where we're into that movie. And like maybe it's a little bit like Batman Forever or like those Schumacher films where, they're like not good, but they're still like fun. They're just sort of like I don't know, like chocolate cake. They're just junk, but they're empty calories, but like also gimme, gimme, gimme. You know what I mean? um,
I'm going to hot take the exact opposite direction from both of you. And I'll tell you why. So in my feelings, um, DC has always been more serious than Marvel. Like Marvel's always been silly. They've had some heavy stories and things like that, but DC, if there's humor, it's like brief or it's kind of in the moment. They're not quipping around, you know. Batman and Soup, sometimes they have a playful repartee, but it's still by the book. Like Batman's known for being Mr. Dark. Like he's the token character of that. And I thoroughly enjoyed Man of Steel because it made Superman realistic. Like, what would someone who has these abilities truly be like? Not like, oh, we'll just wash over it or whatever. The idea of him having to hide in the closet because he can't, because he's overwhelmed. And how do you resolve that? And learning, like, you have to focus it. Like, you have to, someone who doesn't have these abilities trying to talk him through it. The idea of, like, how do you explain a man flying? Oh, you have to remember you're stronger than literally everyone else. All you have to do is jump and you'll feel it. And the only way you're going to be able to train it is to keep testing your limits. And I love that it just like drives home this point of like, yes, this makes sense in this like fantasy way. It makes narrative sense. It makes perfect sense. And there was some silly parts in Man of Steel, but I loved the divisiveness of the ending when he kills Zod by snapping his neck. It's like Superman would never do that. Oh, there's no way. It's like, but in our world, if he lived in a more realistic world where everything can't be, where you have to make a black and white choice, what would he actually do? He's not strong enough to like carry him away. He's not a, like it is a second moment of this. People are going to die, but like, should he snap the neck or not? And then the fact that the follow-on film started with you see like the perspective of all that from the ground. Bruce Wayne running through the town, and you see the chaos. Like, oh my God! Oh, like it was amazing in a cinematic sense, and then they fucked it all. Like they ruined it all. Like this, like all this, like super Batman for oh, if there's even a 1%, then we've got like that's completely illogical and doesn't make sense. And the Lexley that like it went downhill immediately. But this initial setup, this build up of like what if in our world and things like that, I loved. And so to me, it's like I didn't want humor in that. I didn't want it to be a jokey, silly. I wanted to see how this goes. And unfortunately, because it's Zack Snyder, it went super dark and gritty and it had to be like down da 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 da. But it had a really good pickup and it had great potential. And I will say the Snyder cut of the Justice League has amazing moments in it, but it's bloated as hell because he cannot chop it down. He does not know when to quit and when to make it like just whatever. Um, but in terms of the Marvel films, yeah, I'm going to a Marvel film expecting like family friendly or at least fun and silly or jovial because it's people who have powers and everyone else has powers. And there's this big epic world of like, oh, well, you and remember Spider-Man's over there and Iron Man's like, yeah, it's silly. It would be goofy to live in that world. In the DC world, I believe it was explained as they're seen as gods. Like they are seen as this is an insane amount of power for these key individuals and it's limited to a certain number. Whereas Marvel there's heroes popping up everywhere all the time. It's like who's doing what?
Yeah. Yeah, the mutants alone, that just that's like that creates a large amount of either heroes or villains. So as
Yeah,
opposed to the DC universe, which is like
yeah.
metahumans only, experimentations, whatever.
But Rob, listen, Wonder Woman 84 has Kristen Wiig as a supervillain. Like that is again, it is like
Pedro
mm.
Pascal. I mean,
Yes.
come
Oh my
on.
gosh. You.
Life is
That's
good,
daddy
but it could be
there.
better.
Yeah. I don't know. Like I said, I'm okay with dying on that hill. I think it's a fun movie. It's not a masterpiece. I'm not gonna convince anybody that it's like some hidden gem, but like I don't know. It was a little bit more. I don't think it was maybe intentionally campy, but it felt like I got that sort of like Schumacher Batman where it was just so sincere that, it let itself be that kind of into its own maybe silliness that without maybe going full parody, I guess, is what I liked about it. But, to kind of wrap this up, I'll throw out one final question, which is, besides any final thoughts, do you feel like there's any way to sort of course correct the Sony verse, or is it even possible? Ricky, we'll start with you on this one first.
Oh boy, that's a tough question. I think if we're going to continue with the Sonyverse, if things don't happen where, Disney decides to purchase the rights for gazillion dollars, whatever, then they would probably have to do some world building. Like as Rob pointed out previously, every story seems that they're trying to create a new uh, franchise. And what they need to do is nail it down and say, okay, we're going to do the Spider-Verse franchise, or we're going to do whatever other IP that we choose that makes sense. And it can be something that can be obscure, just like a Iron Man. But they really have to focus on one thing and then go from there rather than focusing on multiple prongs and trying, well, building out a web, if you will, you know. So I feel like, if they focus their direction into a specific area and put all the characters and intermingle the movies that they bring out, then they'll be in a good shape.
Oh,
Mm.
are you? I think you're muted, Mike,
I'm
somehow.
still muted. Okay.
Uh,
Um, that's okay. Again, we're not live. It's cool. So Rob, now you're in the hot seat. How will you fix the Sony verse dumpster fire? Like,
I have so many ideas. Okay. And I will say thank you again, Ricky, for this inspiration because I think this has helped triggered this concept. They I've said it already, like MCU is tied to this sacred timeline or this connected tissue. Everything has to fit in this box of this narrative that they're building. Some of the choices that they've made lately, obviously, I think they're trying to get out of that, and you're seeing some like pushback. It's like, oh, it's not working that well. Sony does not have that yet because it has not firmly established a connected tissue. So they have free reign to take big swings, to make big choices. And I think their best bet is to focus on the smaller heroes, focus on the lesser known things. Take someone, whereas Iron Man in the past, probably one of the lesser known Marvel heroes and was elevated up. Take a lesser known hero that they have the rights for, or hell, invent a new hero, whatever. But take someone who maybe you get some level of street and like they're making a what movie kind of thing. Like oddly enough, Madam Web could have been a great opportunity for this. You take someone that has very little comic time and you build up however you want. What's their backstory? What's their added stuff? How do you get from point A to point B with whatever? But you really relish in the fact that you have creative freedom. And as long as you end on this point that's familiar to people, you end on a point that excites people about what's next and not in a, well, now we've got to check in and do all this it's like it is a definitive ending, but there could be more if you want it, and we're excited to show you it. And to me, Madam Web is lacking that enthusiasm. Like, we're excited to show you the rest. Oh, we want you to see blah blah. You need to add that pizzazz and remember that each movie is selling an idea, and is not necessarily an idea of the next film to come, but it's an idea of, do you want more? And more can be more of this character, more films like this, more of whatever. But they really need to take something and really build it, put all of their ducks in this one character, and really make a focused attempt that doesn't rely on like, well, the algorithm shows this or the formula. Like, what do people really have not seen yet? Take a risk. Look at A24 films. Look at stuff where people have done something really obscure and made it into something amazing. And because it's like low-hanging fruit, it's like, well, it's not Spider-Man. It's not Superman. It's not this. It's whoever. I don't know, like Booster Gold's DC, but it'd be something like Booster Gold, like someone super obscure, but it's like, oh, I think I know that one. And then you have a whole film around it.
that's an excellent point. Like, I think that that's what kind of excites me about James Gunn and what he's doing is he's taking these really weird, obscure characters like Polka Dot Man, and like they're really fun and they're interesting, and they're like fleshed out even. Like I feel like the Sonyverse is not learning the right lessons. You know, they're only like learning the bad ones. Like I don't get it. But yeah, um, to your point, Rob, about like A24, why not hire like someone, you know, that is super weird and creative and just let them do something like let them do whatever they want, basically. Like, what do you have to lose? You're already kind of making formulaic garbage. Like, I don't know. Like Robert Eggers doing a you know, Marvel associated movie, I'd see the shit out of that. I really would. Like, I don't
I
know,
just
just
watched The Curse, so I'd love to see Nathan Fielder directed Marvel.
yes. Oh, that would be so weird. I would love that. Yes.
That would be great.
Who
I'm
was
currently draining my account and I need that movie to be made right now.
I think was it Fox? I want to say it was Fox who did New Mutants, right? It wasn't Sony.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
believe it was
So
Fox.
the initial concept of this idea of these lesser known or early versions of heroes in a mental institute and trapped in like, are these powers real or not? And then if they are real, wait, what is that giant bear? Like this buildup of like, what's the real horror? What's the real menace? And it starts with it's us, and then it's like it's something bigger and things like that. I love that idea. In execution, the film was terrible. I hated it. But it was a good concept. And I'm like, I want to see more of that because they pitched it as X-Men, but a horror film. I'm like, oh, I love that. Like this, but of this film, like this, but of this, like instead of just, oh, it's just an action adventure type whatever, make it a horror film, make it a mystery film, make it a drama. Like it doesn't just have to be, oh, it's superhero, so it must be this, this, and this.
Yeah.
Right.
Just the Sonyverse stuff just feels like straight to streaming, honestly. It just feels like dumping on, I don't know, like Disney Plus. It's whatever, it comes and goes. But yeah, I don't know. I mean, it's a shame because I feel like there are actors in this that I really like. That like Adam Scott, like oh my God, he's like one of my favorite actors. Like, I I am like obsessed with Severance.
Oh,
Um,
such a great show.
see, Rob, we need to be watching that
I
now.
need to get Apple TV, is what I
Um,
need apparently.
well, you're just gonna have to hang out with me more. Oh, oh darn. Um, yeah, but I don't know. I mean, I try not to be super cynical. Like they do. I mean, these movies, even the really shitty ones, do take a lot of work. And yeah, it's such a shame because like I don't, you know, blame Dakota Johnson for firing her agent and like, you know, getting her in this like god awful movie. Is she the greatest actress to begin with? Like, no. Like, I don't mean to sound shitty, but like, not really. But I don't know.
She's a nepotism baby. So
Yeah.
I mean, she's one of those like
Yeah.
And I
I mean,
I
she's not bad, but
Yeah.
I want to be clear. I knew going in that Madam Web was going to be a bad movie. I knew that going in, like right off the bat. Like you just watch the trailer, like wow, this movie's going to be dog shit. But it could have been not dog shit. It could have surprised me that way, but they could have also leaned into the camp. Like
Mhm.
if you know you're making like not the best, you go camp. Like you lean into like we know this word, but let's wink at the camera. Let's do something silly. Let's try stuff out. And that way it's still redeemable. I feel like Morbius maybe kind of either unintentionally or intentionally did that. Like it embraced the memes, it embraced the silliness, and it was more productive than it could have been. Like I think it was one of those where if they hadn't leaned a bit more, if they hadn't leaned as much as they did, it would have been even worse. Like it's still not a great film, but it's a better film because they said we know it's silly, we'll lean in a little bit on that.
yeah,
Yeah.
it's Morbin time.
Yeah. Yeah. I also just love how collectively like Sony got trolled into bringing Morbius back into theaters and then it bombed for a second time and I'm like, how are you this bad at like your job? Like how do you not know that like trolls are just trolling you? I mean,
I they just need to turn the IP over to us. Like that's what they need to do.
There you
Just, you
go.
know, like these people, these suits, they just don't know what they're doing.
Mhm.
Yes, I feel like yeah. I mean, honestly, I've never written a screenplay in my life. I feel like I feel confident I could do a million times
Better than
and that I don't know, that's always the big frustrating thing for me. There's so many talented writers like out there that have so many amazing cool ideas, and like a really great script doesn't cost anything, right? Like you might buy it to be able to make it, but like I don't know, you just why is it this hard for a huge studio to find amazing talent? Like I feel like you get, 4 or 5 comic book fans, you could probably get a writing session where you could get a really compelling, at least first draft out. If not like a fully fleshed out kind of ready to go concept. But it baffles me. Like there was I'm trying to think what movie it was where it was like a huge studio movie, and it was like it was a first time screenwriter. And I'm like, what are you doing? Like I'm just and again, I think like I'm not saying don't take a chance on somebody like new, but I'm also like there's so many other great writers out there that like could really be awesome at this. Like, why not try some actual comic book writers to at least maybe just act as consultant? I mean, not maybe necessarily script writing, but like, they know these characters. In some cases, they've created these characters. Like, I don't understand. It just seems like such a simple solution that,
I, I miss the days of spec scripts, being able to submit
hmm,
those. Like Star
yeah,
Trek used to be, the best way to get into television. Like I think it was Ronald D. Moore,
hmm,
he wrote a spec script for the Next Generation, and he became the Klingon guy. And look at him now. He's producer. He has multiple shows. He had Battlestar Galactica. That was a way for him as a fan to get involved. And I really do think like the biggest issue that we have now is that this corporatization
hmm,
of the comic books rather than when I was a kid, it felt like it was a community. You were a fan, you went to the comic book store, you were, you know, chatting with other comic book fans, you were doing all those things. It was a community. Now it feels it's very homogenous, it's very spread
hmm.
out. They want to reach as many people as possible because they're spending so much money on it, but it also feels disingenuous.
I
Yeah.
know it's like a Sony focused panel, but another Fox movie that I remember was the Fantastic Four film. The latest one was Josh
Mm,
Trank, and they picked him because he did um, the one with the people at the Chronicle. And
yeah.
it was a really cool found footage film about telekinesis. I love telekinesis, one of my favorite special powers. And so to see it portrayed in that found footage, I was like, oh, that's really clever. And then you find out the script that he had was almost pure horror. Like it was almost all body horror about like, oh, the ravages of
Yeah.
your body getting shaved. And I think there's an audience for that. But obviously, you're taking a property like Fantastic Four, which has always been family friendly and kind of their engagement with each other, and to go so left field, I feel like that was a mistake. But then also once the studio started meddling in, they missed the point as well. Like it's like they were either trying too hard to make it as goofy as possible, mixed in with this dark, gritty film, and that's how you get this hot mess that you ended up with. But if you had gone pure, silly, goofy shenanigans, you get kind of like Tim Story stuff, which was fun, but I think people wanted to see more than just this slapstick silliness. So it's really important to find not just creative visions, but also someone who can take those, as you said, those different audiences and make something that's going to not necessarily, obviously, you won't make something that everyone can agree on all at once, but something that really gets the spirit of what you're trying to showcase and also invents new ideas and new concepts. One of the biggest frustrations I think I have with comic films is when the fans come out like, "Oh, that's not what happened in the comics." Like, well, you read the comic. You read the comic. You already know this story. Why do you want it exactly as it
Right?
was?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I 100% agree. I don't know. I just think Sony just needs to just, I mean, outside of like just, I hope the next Spider-Verse movie like sticks to landing. Um, there's always like that curse
Oh,
of the,
now you jinxed it, Mike. Good job.
no. Now y'all are gonna blame me if it's
It's
bad.
all your fault.
Yeah.
But I mean, besides that, like they just need to just hit the restart button and maybe just start from scratch. Um, Listen to this podcast because we had some great ideas. I feel like I don't know. I just feel like there's a million avenues you could go. They're just always taking the shittiest one. But I don't know. Maybe Craven will be good. I doubt it. But stranger things have happened. Who knows? But we'll see. I guess we're getting that this year as well. I feel like everybody's well and thoroughly over it already. But before we wrap, do y'all have any like socials that you want to get out there where people can follow you and all that good stuff?
I don't have any yet. I'm sure at some
Me too.
point I will. I might start a podcast with my friends, talk about movies, but
All right.
I don't want to step on your toes, Mike.
No, there can only be one podcaster, and like it will be me. I have all the Infinity Stones. All right. Well, I'll just stalk you the old-fashioned way.
You
I
can
will.
find me on email.
If I can, Mike, I do want to plug another, I guess, podcast then or another spot. So like New Rock Stars, I think is really valuable in breaking down movies and getting a lot of Easter eggs, a lot of behind the scenes. They're currently doing the run of the X-Men films leading up to Deadpool, and it's been really cool seeing. I think we talked about earlier about like Kevin Feige, and I learned that he was involved in the Bryan Singer X-Men films, which I was not aware of. And
Mhm.
he was one of the reasons why a lot of the comic nuance was added in. Originally, they were going to completely, I think Bryan Singer said, don't read the comics. I don't want to. So imagine how different that world would have been if it wasn't
Wow.
for a little Feige. So,
Hmm. That's pretty cool. I did not know that.
yeah.
Yeah, so unless there's anything else, I had a blast talking to you guys and this was a lot of fun. Um I guess if I had just some really quick final thoughts, I just think like just do better. Like I don't know. It's so funny because I saw there was a video essay I was listening to, and people are like, fans just aren't buying everything, every comic book movie that they're selling anymore. Like you just need to expect better and demand better. And you vote with your dollars, right? Like this is not doing great at the box office. That's the only thing that studios kind of understand, like you don't like your movie, it's not good. Like it's that simple. But yeah, no, I don't know. Maybe flops is kind of what they need to sort of like get their head of their out of their ass and finally, I don't know. There's so many really interesting characters, like the expanded universe of Spider-Man. Like there's just a whole,
Black
I
Cat
don't,
would be amazing.
yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, exactly. Like you have so many really interesting like characters that you can explore. Rob, like you were saying, hell, create a new one. I don't know, what I mean? Just like something interesting, like keep us on our toes. Like I remember everybody was so thoroughly over Madam Web like before it even came out, and that's not never a good sign. So, um, well, I will link all my socials in the description where y'all can follow me. I'm on Twitter, X, whatever, but I'm not really on there as much, but I'll link that in the description as well. And please subscribe to the channel and all that good stuff. And thank you guys so much for taking the time to join me today.
Yeah.
Thank
Thanks
you
for
so
having us.
much. It was a great time.
Yeah.
Appreciate it.
Yeah.